Anyway, I'd like to have any questions you have.
Well, we don't want to hold you up too long because we know that there's, sun and fun to be had outside. But this is kind of an exciting moment in Pineview Park's history and the history of the Rattlesnake neighborhood. My name is Donna Gockler. I'm the director here at Parks and Recreation. I'm sitting at the computer is Dave Shaw. He's our Park and Trail Design and Development Manager, and we'll be managing this project. And as it goes into construction, there will be another park staff assigned to it. And this is Fred Ogram with Abbotswood, and he's our landscape architect. And there's a number of Pineview Park Board members in the room, so just have you guys wave and give plenty of opportunity. The reason I wanted to point them out is they've been instrumental and played a very significant, strong leadership role in making this project possible. For any park improvement, pretty much requires that the citizens create a grassroots effort, and Pineview Park and the Rattlesnake neighborhood have certainly done that, and we appreciate the help and support. A little bit of a brief history, because we don't like to rehash, but we also don't want to forget our past. In January 22 of this year, 2007, the SID 541 passed City Council. There's about 1,700 parcels in the SID, and it passed with less than a 10% protest, which is very, very good as SIDs go. That passing followed about 2 years of public process led by the Pineview Park Board and various citizens in the Rattlesnake neighborhood. I just want to assure you it wasn't only a group of half a dozen to a dozen people. There were many, many involved in this. The SID is for $750,000, and there are no additional funds. I get asked that frequently. There's no other pot of money unless we as a group in this room and lovers of the park find it somewhere, mysteriously. And then there were a number of mandates that we all agreed upon through the creation of the SID and when we met, and that was that we wanted to have the park affordable, sustainable, accessible, safe, legal, meaning it meets codes and standards, and environmentally conscious. And I think with that, I'm not going to back you way up to 1960, the start of the park. Instead, I'm going to turn it over to Fred so we can kind of get excited about the future of the park.
Thank you, Donna. And thanks for coming out tonight. It really is exciting to present park design and go through a process with a lot of concerned stakeholders, and a beautiful site like this and a beautiful setting really sets the foundation for really some great design to come from it. So I'm going to back up just a little bit, though. Remember that when we started in our part of the process, we conducted a detailed site analysis, and at the beginning of the last charrette, we kind of went through really the observations that we had of the site, and looked at opportunities, constraints, how the SID might be able to fit within the current conditions, how minor modifications might be able to make even better enhancements, how to balance what the stakeholder wants and needs were with how current placement of certain items were. And within that, we analyzed the existing play equipment that was over at the elementary school. We looked at the riparian zone and how the site abuts one of the primary watersheds to Missoula. We went through and analyzed those conditions. We looked at the conditions of the existing play equipment. We looked at the existing vegetation, the type of vegetation, the type of trees, the cover that they were providing, the conditions of the turf grasses. We looked at SEPTED issues, crime prevention through environmental design. We mapped where crime was occurring in the neighborhood, in the park, what type of crime. We looked at were there instances of emergency response to the park for given things, and trying to ascertain if there was any problems that maybe could be fixed through the design process. Within that, we looked at the condition of the fences, the backstops, the existing of the play courts, and really created a detailed analysis and a set of preliminary recommendations from our office of things that we ought to look at as we delve into the charrette. So we went into the charrette, and those of you that were there that night, we really kind of focused our charrette process on, we knew what we wanted to achieve in the SID, that was a given. But we wanted to look at the park and look at the context sensitivity, that could we create a park that fit better than it does currently? Were there missed opportunities that we might be able to create a greater sense of context to the community? We looked at circulation, we looked at recreational amenities, we looked at passive elements, we looked at the maintenance issues, we looked at safety, and then environmental sensitivity. And we were all then divided up into different groups and teams, and we kind of tackled those broad ideas. In addition to that, we also had a very detailed questionnaire that we had really good response on, and many of you gave us even further detail about the very particular nuances of this park and the history that you've had with it, so that I could have a greater understanding as we go through the design. So all that gets laid out on the table, and the design process then begins. Site analysis, stakeholder concerns, opportunities and constraints, the SID, and we lay all those out and then start to evaluate where different opportunities exist in the design. So with that, Dave, maybe go to the first slide. We knew in the SID that we needed restrooms, new play equipment, irrigation and walkway renovations, resurfacing of the tennis courts, ice rink improvements, a storage facility, resurfacing the basketball court, playing field improvements, picnic shelter replacement, additional tennis court possibly, and improved lighting. And then the total funds for the entire project were $750, and that comes down to about $516 in construction terms. So the next slide. So I mentioned that these were the team assignments, and we had, I thought, a really good charrette process that had a lot of great ideas that came out of that that helped. So next slide. So the first one in that context sensitivity goes back to just recognizing where this site is, what is it adjacent to on both sides, what are the neighborhoods it serves, and how are these adjacencies using the site, because that begins to lay out how circulation will play later. But in context sensitivity, this is one of the, one of the more fun portions of the design, because you get to explore the history. And the site and the rattlesnake in Missoula has a lot of rich history. And to have a park this close to, some of the beginnings of Missoula, we felt like there was a real opportunity to try to express that. And one of the questions I think came out that night in the charrette is, if you closed your eyes and opened them, would you know you were in Missoula, or even better yet, would you know you're in the rattlesnake, versus any park anywhere USA? So the problem is when we get parks that are led by play structures, we end up getting that homogenized kind of play structure park that we all see everywhere you go. In every travel, you see virtually the same kind of park in a neighborhood replicated over and over and over. So the challenge from the designer side is, how do we put in the play structure without letting it take over the park? And that gets back to this context sensitivity. We really felt like the elementary school and the relationship with the elementary school was a really strong thing. The naming of this elementary school, the Rattlesnake, when we're in the hallways and you're looking, you expect to see some plaque that, why is it called Rattlesnake? Why is the Rattlesnake called the Rattlesnake? Where's the folklore? Where's the real history? You ask anybody on the street, are there rattlesnakes in Missoula? No, there's no rattlesnakes here. Why are we having all this rattlesnake stuff? Well, it was a really interesting little exploration in history that, and two are really folklore, and one is a construed idea from the Salish and the shape of the river and their naming of it that then became the rattlesnake. So they have a word that, like a snake, that they would call that river. And it ended up coming around as it got translated into the rattlesnake. But the other more interesting folklore are at the headwaters of the rattlesnake. That one version said that there was a placer mine, there's a mining town up there, and one of the miners was asleep in his bed, and they came in and opened the door, and there he was in the bed, and the rattlesnake was still locked onto him, and he was dead from the rattlesnake. And thus, it's at the headwater of that creek, so let's call it the Rattlesnake Creek. Another one said that there was a guy about about the middle of the rattlesnake that was out collecting firewood, and he came across the rattlesnake, and he got bit and had multiple puncture wounds when they found him. And it's a terrible place, you know, that Rattlesnake Creek. Don't go there, guys. You know, good guys die up there. So it just was. It's interesting, and the story is fun on different levels. It's also interesting how little known is about it too, because we spent quite a bit of time, and the head ranger here was stumped, and they put their head historian on it, and they dug through all their files, and you come down to these really three themes, and two of them are very similar. So we think they may have even, you know, splintered off at some point from the same story. But we thought it was it is a rattlesnake, it's on the rattlesnake, and it's an opportunity to tell that story. Other things that we found that we thought really interesting was, of course, starting in prehistoric time and looking back at Mount Jumbo and talking about the geologic history. There is an There is an opportunity from this vantage point, from a neighborhood, to look back and talk a little bit about the geologic truths and the geologic history here. There was another opportunity to talk about the Salish and the Indian Trail that was adjacent to the zone. There was the opportunity about the Salish coming to this creek to fish for small bullhead trout. There was another story about Lewis and Clark, and you find little variables in this tale as well. But the majority of it says that Lewis and Clark divided up on July 3rd, and Lewis was going to go back down to Traveler's Rest, and Clark was going to cross over the Clark Fork, and they picked, right here at the confluence of the Rattlesnake to cross. They built a little barge. The barge broke up. He swam to shore. They made an encampment very close, and the only reference in that was we liked it because it didn't have mosquitoes. But beyond that, there's not a whole lot of story other than that's about where they think it was. Okay, and then there's some other historians that say, oh, you guys are all wrong. They crossed way down there by the airport. Okay, but it's still a piece of folklore that ties this in a unique way to this community. The white settlement into the area obviously started at the confluence of the Clark Fork and the Rattlesnake. So there's some great history and opportunities to kind of explore that and talk about that and create a sense of place from those stories that surround it. There is a storyline that has to do with the creek again and environmental sensitivity and the fact that it's one of the primary watersheds for the city. There's a lot of history in the creation of the dam and what it did to the trout runs and exploration for placer up the creek, and so there's a lot of contemporary history that is there as well. So, next slide. Oops. There we go. So, from the charrette process, what came out of this was those who were assigned to this said, we'd be thrilled to see if we encourage local stewardship and volunteerism, that we had historical interpretive signage and monuments to tell the story, and we would be disappointed if we closed our eyes and we reopened them and thought we were just in any park USA. So our guiding principles in this portion of the park design was want people to buy in and care about our park. We want to enhance the connections culturally to the past. We want to enhance connections to the greenway, and we want to emphasize the existing connections. So with that, we have designed, and you'll see in the slides as we go, the opportunity for 6 interpretive signs on the edge of the park where it abuts the rattlesnake drainage. And they really go from prehistoric to current, and that drops down in these 6 points.
Seats up in the front. Sorry, I think you're running.
So that's the Missoula floods and the geology, the formation of the Rocky Mountains, the Salish people, Western expansion, Lewis and Clark, early settlements in the rattlesnake, and the water cycle and riparian habitats. So, next slide. So as you'll see, I'm going to show you little snippets of the design, and then I'll unveil the whole design so you can see it, so you'll know what you're looking at, when you see it in the total, because there's a lot of things to look at. So where we're at on the side, this is where the existing fence line is along the rattlesnake drainage, and the park goes this way. So improvements to circulation and all that, you'll see in later slides. But along this edge, we have created pop-outs in the fence line. This is where the trailhead currently is that comes into the park. There are pop-outs with interpretive signs. There's 6 of them that tell these stories. So as you walk along that edge of the park, you can pull off and actually get some of these pieces of history explained. Next slide. So what does that look like? Here's the rattlesnake drainage going down the side. This is an improved fence line. These are all native plant materials. One of the ideas here is, and I left things back on the back counter to show you even additional pieces of the puzzle. But, like to be able to put on that edge, plants of the Lewis and Clark expedition and put tags, put the botanical name, explain what it was. The Salish came to this area for the Bitterroot, and there's opportunities to create a native planting along that edge. Everything is back drained into the park, so this becomes a biofilter area that will not have fertilizer or pesticide use or any of that. It's meant to be an extension, but still it has to divide from one to the other of the native natural area into the park. So as you're familiar with the park, this is where you're going to come off near where the current tennis courts are over here. And one of the things we wanted to improve connectivity, and what you see in the foreground, this is a stretching station. So you can get off your bike or get ready for a run and actually do a series of lower body stretches on this stuff on the edge. And then you see down here, here's one of the interpretive signs. Next slide. And this is what it could look like. This type of an idea. We've designed them to be about 2 feet by 3 foot, and it's impregnated fiberglass, so it's very sturdy, rigid. You can't hurt it with snow or temperature or direct sun. It cleans up if there's vandalism. It's outside of maybe scratching the surface. It's pretty durable stuff. It allows you to go full color and really tell a story nicely in that way. Next slide. Okay, so the next group tackled circulation, and they said they would be thrilled to see improved walkways in the park and improved ADA accessibility, and that they would be disappointed if the park discouraged the use of bikes within the park. And you remember that night in the site analysis, in fact, even our opening picture, you see the park, the bikes are just kind of thrown on the edge of the ball fields, and there's bikes in the park, but it's not really controlled, and so we really felt like there's an opportunity to embrace the bike as we redesign in here and actually deal with it so that we have bike racks and we have places where bikes should go and without destroying the lawn or breaking sprinkler heads and things like that. So we've made it a design component here. The guiding principles were ADA access to the park is available to wheelchair use. We talked about an aging population and the baby boomers and what amenities are needed in our parks right now as we age. And the park users, that demographic, that age bracket will change here over the next 10 to 20 to 30 years a lot. So where we have programmed a lot of active play ball fields, the real demand and use will be for an aging population as that baby boomer use starts to go to our parks. And that group is living longer and will be more health conscious and wants access to open space. So it's important that we think about it now when we're making little tweaks to our parks or changing or doing new parks. Bike access and bike racks. On the east side, there needs to be a place for pushing strollers, a walking trail around the perimeter, design paths and trails to limit speed, a stretching station at the entrances. Next slide. Okay, so, and you'll see, as you see the whole picture, that there's a series of asphalt trails. There's a hierarchy of trail type and need. There is a trail that is wide enough for a park maintenance vehicle to get in and maintain certain amenities like pumping out of the restroom or getting in to mow the lawn or take compost. So there's a need to be able to get a vehicle to bisect. So there is one width for that to occur. There's a primary circulation path that is intended for both walkers, strollers, and bikes, and that's another width. And then we have minor little connecting trails that tie it together, where it really is for a few people to cross shoulder to shoulder. So we are, by design, limiting based on usage and connectivity what those widths are. Next slide. Okay, so here's kind of a long view into the park, and what you'll see is, like you say, this is a narrow walk, this is a kind of a collector area, and maybe you see this wide area where they can actually get the park maintenance vehicle into the park. What you're doing is you're kind of looking from east to west through here, and there's benches, and there's planting areas, and there's a new pavilion, and there's some play structure in the back, and you'll see greater detail to that as we move forward. Next slide. Okay, the next group was tasked with recreational amenities. And what they told us was we would be thrilled to see resurfaced play courts, improved play equipment, and we would be really disappointed if the park became a competitive sports complex. So that changed some of our initial analysis too, because we made some visual analysis based on some heavy use or perceived heavy use of both baseball and soccer. So when you look at the spatial relationships of the open space and you look at how much can actually be accomplished within that space, we found that there really is some limiting factors to how much play can actually occur if it was organized sports play. And really what I heard that night was we want practices to occur, but we don't want to be, the sports complex. We want to be the neighborhood practice area, but not the sports complex. The guiding principles were multi-use skating rink, open space for youth soccer practice and pickup games, baseball diamonds, only for practice and pickup games, not to encourage baseball competition. At least one full basketball court, asphalt was okay. Resurface the tennis courts. Playgrounds should include bouldering. Current play equipment should be replaced. Keep existing tall swing from the top line. So, next slide. So, this kind of gets into kind of what is the new heart of the park. And this is the new picnic pavilion. It's kind of a multi-use picnic pavilion. You'll see some pictures of that in a minute. The spaces are divided for the play, and that's to divide it for age appropriateness. So there is truly a top lot area that's a 3 to 5 year old area with age appropriate equipment for 3 to 5 year olds. And we have another zone that is 7 to 12, and then another zone that's 12 and up, that's kind of a tween zone. And the equipment changes in character as we move through those zones. They're separated by design so that we eliminate the conflicts between older and little kids. And we know that little kids sometimes will be very intimidated to go play on a piece of equipment if it's being hogged by the big kids. The big kids are super aggressive and running, and it's easy to knock the little kids over. And so we find all these little conflicts in our playground. So if we're going to put it back together, it's better to divide it and allow them to feel comfortable within their spaces. We also find that teens and preteens, or tweens, they like to go to a playground to socialize, but not to be super active on a swing necessarily. So the equipment changes in character a little bit as well as we move through these zones. You'll see this is a basketball court. Basketball court is reconfigured in this. You'll see these are some of the bouldering pieces. These are existing trees that are running through, and then there's the inclusion of new trees in the park to add additional shade, and they're associated both for highlighting entries to the park, but also creating shade on open spaces, near benches, and observation areas for the kids. Next slide. So here's a view of kind of how that looks, looking kind of south through a play structure. The play structure has been put together with a company that the group had been familiar with in the beginning, and that was Compani. They are very innovative in their play equipment. There is nothing like it here in Missoula that I know of currently. Sure. It's very interactive, it's kinetic, it moves, kids get to interact with it side by side on different opposing pieces, so the arrangement of the pieces is important, and their interaction of the pieces is important. The color scheme we toned down from what the manufacturer originally had suggested to. We put it in a green and yellow with some red highlights so that it blended a little bit more organically with the setting of the park. Again, I think we felt like if you go with those cartoon colors, then it's all about the playground, and it becomes just kind of that Park of Anywhere USA. Even though it's very unique play equipment, it's the really primary colors that just stand out across the lawn, and that's all you kind of see. So by purpose, it's been muted and blended into the landscape. What you see beyond is some of the bolder features, and they are integrated, and they have been done also age appropriate in size. So it's a thematic element, but allow for freedom of non-structured play, so that imagination can take over and they can have these flights of fancy of climbing Everest or Mount Jumbo and hanging off the cliffs and just do fun stuff without the structure of sit on a swing and go back and forth. Right? Within the park, there are multiple areas for benches and seating, and each pop-out you see has been designed to meet ADA and also be able to park either a wheelchair or a stroller out of the travelway. There are elements of ADA with trail design that you have to have a 74-inch high clearance over the top of the trail. So existing low branches and things that were next to some of these trails will have been limbed up to allow the clearance to meet ADA and access. Next slide. So this is another view looking through another zone of the play area, and you'll see the picnic pavilion in the back, and it's been placed in the setting of the park, and you can see the skyline in the back. Within this, there are more trash receptacles, but there also is a recycling component that's been added into the park to really maybe let this park be the starting point for really establishing recycling type of ideas in the park. Next slide. Because of the current configuration of the basketball court going north-south, it really cut off a piece of opportunity with the open turf area, and this was one of the elements that we spun around east-west. It's been designed so that you could play a full court game, but really 2 half courts would be easily accomplished. The run-out zones now are onto turf on the 2 ends, so it's a little safer condition than currently exists on the north end of the current park. And so, you know, someone diving out of bounds is going into the turf rather than into the rocks or the junipers or that type of thing. Next slide. Okay, so then our next group tackled passive elements. And, you know, passive elements are the opportunity to just sit and enjoy a park. Sit and enjoy our walk, our stroll, our, you know, just take it in and not necessarily have to do anything, okay? Now, if we don't think about passive elements in the beginning in an active park, we end up running just conflicts. So we've designed it for play, so the kids are playing here, kids are over there, people are running to the park, the bikes go in here, and if we don't control that and manipulate that in the design, then someone who just wants to come down to the park and stroll and sit and just enjoy their neighborhood park then get left out, and they feel like they're always in the way. So it was important that we deal with this up front, and the group told us that night that we would be thrilled to see little maintenance or less expensive to keep up. We'd like recycled products with interpretive signing explaining the use of the materials. We want more shade, seating, bathroom facilities, and water. And we would be disappointed if the park became a competitive sports complex. So obviously we're having to balance a lot of different things in here. The guiding principles were we really enjoy those views of Mount Jumbo and the town, the neighborhoods. The picnic pavilion should be replaced. The current pavilion is in poor condition and hazardous. We want more benches, include easy seating for older residents, and that's ADA takes care of that for you. As long as we have an ADA accessible bench, there are very specific relationships to the bench dimensions, and having armrests so that you can actually put your hand down and lift yourself in and out of the seat itself. Include a row of aspen or native trees for shade along the south side of the park, and then improvements to the multi-use for the ice rink. And really that was kind of a side discussion that we had that night was there anything else we could do with the ice skating rink in the summertime? And we looked at that and actually explored, you know, some of the things that were thrown out that night. Could we make a little amphitheater? There's really good shade over there in the summer. Could we use that for a shady area? What things could we maybe do over there? And it really is a fairly narrow space, and when you start to look at an informal gathering, people are sitting low, and it just didn't quite pencil out for like this informal amphitheater idea. But we did make the enhancements along the edge of it, and I think those are exciting, and it actually kind of draws people to that rattlesnake edge and to the zone of the park, which is otherwise underutilized. So I think it's improved. Next slide. So passive elements that you're kind of seeing in here, the new pavilion, the opportunity to stroll safely through the park. There is some picnic grounds now established. There are a lot more opportunities to sit. There are opportunities to get rid of trash and recycle trash. The turf areas, we did a detailed soils analysis, and when the plan gets implemented, we do have a recommendation through the amendment process to improve the soil porosity and drainage conditions, and ultimately the turf health. Areas are isolated for ease of maintenance, so that when the city crews come in to mow the park, it's designed that areas are isolated and there's not a lot of little chopped up pieces of turf that they have to get off the ride-on mowers or and get out there and do hand work. Okay, so there's a lot of things that have been accomplished in the design to help in the maintenance aspects as well. Next slide. And just give you an idea of, you see this slide as compared to some of the other views, is a lot more calm. This is a pastoral section of the park. There is just areas for picnic. These are set on concrete. This goes to maintenance as well, but there's a concrete ring that these tables sit on, And so the lawn mowing can go around and through them, the distances between them, so they have to get off and individually weed whack or do a lot of extensive maintenance around this area. It's in the shade of the trees, it's outside of the, and has a distance away from the play area. And there's other spots like this in the park for passive area. Next slide. So this is the new pavilion, and this really becomes the physically the heart of the park, but it also is the kind of the iconic center of the park. So meet me at the picnic shelter kind of idea. The design of the park, when you see it in total, isn't really spokes of a wheel. It's similar here because it's the heart, and different trails radiate out from the zone. But the park is really based on an ellipse, several different ellipse patterns that run out through the diagonal through this zone, and you'll see it more clearly in the next few slides. Go back. It's okay. Sorry. The characterization of the picnic pavilion was we went with a green roof. We went with timber frame type of detailings that are reminiscent of the timber and the history of timber in the region and the mills. We went with native Montana stone on the columns and pilasters, and these are elements of context sensitivity as well. So we are trying to be harmonious with the local natural environment, those building materials that are of Missoula and not brought in from some other place and seen forward. So, next slide. Okay, so maintenance. So this group tackled maintenance, and what they said was, we'd be thrilled to see little maintenance, easy to keep up. We'd like to be able to have volunteer days to help in the cost of maintaining the park. We'd like little to no use of pesticides if possible, and we would be disappointed if maintenance required a lot of time and was very expensive to keep up. The guiding principles became environmental protection of the riparian habitat bordering the west side along the rattlesnake, control of noxious weeds. We'd like little irrigation if possible. That's not currently completely practical in the turf grass component of this, but it's definitely practical when we go into the shrub and ground cover plantings that are internal to the park, and then the riparian interface zone. Those are native plants, and while they may have a interim irrigation drip system to get them established, they will be disconnected and go xeriscape, so we wouldn't need any water after they're established. Control runoff, no de-icer on the sidewalks in the winter. This is harmful to the nearby riparian habitat. Include additional pet way stations. Existing facility shed is unacceptable, so they were asking if that could be replaced. Native landscaping. Keep concrete and asphalt paths to a minimum to help in winter maintenance. Keep playground equipment that requires little to no maintenance. Next slide. Okay, so in this little section I told you there is 2 routes in the park that are at a width to allow a maintenance vehicle to traverse the park and access the park from hard surface versus trying to drive out onto the turf. And within this is a new maintenance shed. This is adjacent to the ice rink right here, and this is the existing ice rink shelter in this location. And then here's the street edge down below, and this is the park trash collection receptacle here. And then this piece here runs off and connects into the Rouse Lake, another trailhead that runs at the end of the street currently, so it gets tied into this park configuration. And then some of the things you're seeing in this, and I'll show you more, was one of the requests was to add some timer lighting for the ice rink surface, and so there's one there. We added 3 others that have night sky cutoff lenses that are isolated so that they're just shining down in a rectangular pattern on the ice. There's one that poses this one over here, so there's 4, and they would be timered off control. Next slide. So this kind of gives you an idea of what that looks like. The restroom facility it's very expensive to get a full 4-season plumbed restroom. And so we did go with a 3-season enclosed porta potty, both for expense, then also the ease of maintenance and the ability to deal with long-term kind of problems here. So again, it has stone, it has a green roof, it has timber, and porta potty components. There's an ADA porta potty that slides in one section, and then a regular size one that slides into another slot. You can see the maintenance vehicle that's off within the trail, but there's room so that you can still, so if the truck was parked there and you want to use the park, it's not in the way. There's room to get around. And then you can see how these structures architecturally to tie in with the materials we're talking about, and additional shade trees in here. Next slide. Okay. So, safety. So we found out a few things when we did the analysis of the park, and a lot of the things would be characterized, the stuff that's happened around the park have been kind of typical park vandalism. Really no major problems. It's a safe neighborhood, and a lot of minor things, I would call it. There still is a list of things that have happened within 2 miles that would typically astonish a typical neighborhood that type of stuff's happened in your backyard, but it does, and it's a big city, and this stuff happens. One of the keys, though, that we look at when we're looking at playground design and parks is the attraction to, obviously, for children and sexual predators. So we mapped out where they are, what they, who they are, and proximity to the park. Looked at the amount of vegetation, looked at hiding zones, places that could not have clear surveillance, areas that, if the police were to come in and just take a look-see at the park, could they see the park from either side? And could the neighbors' sight lines kind of see into the park? So we really had to kind of look at the understory, below 74, 75 inches down to the ground plane, and look at these sight lines. And so some of the improvements are to improve those sight lines so it is clearly visible. And so the neighborhood also can kind of self-police it too. You can see who's in your park and what's going on, and not worry that they're behind a corner causing some mischief that you don't want them to be there after the park is closed. So they told us that they'd be thrilled to see little maintenance. Maintenance required a lot of attention. Disappointed if the maintenance required a lot of attention. Maintenance storage shed was not renovated. Guiding principles were create safer parking lots, but don't encourage driving to and from the park. Encourage other alternatives. This was reinforced by people who are running, walking, and biking to the park. And so again, we really wanted to try to encourage people to ride the bike to the park and have a place for it, so it's not in conflict with everything either. Include bike racks. More lighting would just encourage night use. Park closes at dark. Play equipment should be updated and should meet required fall zone standards. And existing play equipment should be analyzed for the use of recycled materials. Okay, so next slide. So we did, obviously all the play areas currently as designed meet ADA standards. They have safe fall zones. We've programmed it with an engineered wood fiber, both for cost, but also because it's a natural wood bark kind of look, and it blends in with the natural setting of the park without going into poured-in-place kind of decorative fall zone surfacing, and the maintenance of those could be more expensive in the long run. Regenerating the engineered wood fiber is less expensive and easier to do. So our play zones have been done that way. Those are typically 12 inches thick of a fall zone material with an under drain system, so there's no standing water and there's no dirt coming through, so there's a filter fabric underneath it. So it really is a really good fall zone, and fall zones, the depth of those fall zones are based on the actual equipment and the height of the equipment that it can actually fall, and that determines the spread away from the next closest equipment and the depth of the fall zone. All that's been done. Other conflicts that we kind of looked in the analysis and we talked about that night was cars coming in and just parking haphazard in a given way. We had an ongoing discussion that night, and all we really came out of that was, let's clean up this edge and just, let people go ahead and park. We talked about maybe creating a cul-de-sac and turning and drop-off zones and all sorts of things. So, but the simple solution from that night was just make parallel parking so everyone can come in organized, and you expect to see a car coming and going from a controlled spot. And then create an edge on the park side so that you can come out of your vehicle and kids have a place outside so they're not going behind cars. Okay. So there is an access along this edge now to the park. The fence, the perimeter fencing on both sides came out to create a more openness and inviting feeling to the park. The fence on the rattlesnake is up and the fence on the school is up, but from the two neighborhoods it's open. You'll see an indication here. This is the backstop for this corner baseball practice area. The control of this has been done with a berm. So there is a continuous berm down this, and this would represent a 1 foot contour. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4 feet maximum. It's in a 4-to-1 slope, so it's about that type of an angle. So it's just kind of a gentle, rounded berm. So if you're in the soccer field or whatever, and the ball is rolling this way, there's an actual berm that rolls it back in and creates a differentiation without having to build a fence line in there. What that also does is takes the focus off of some of the problems that are happening at the current entry with just wear. And so our primary trail on this end comes out of this zone. There's a park signage with the rules. We cleaned up all the signage, and it's in one tasteful place at each entry and integrated into the sign detail now. Next slide. So this kind of just shows this is clear to the roadway, no parking, and allows you to come onto the trail network. Really, this is heading toward the playgrounds and the active areas, and this goes over to the open grass and the ball fields. There is a removable bollard. This is the access route for the maintenance vehicle. So there's a removable bollard that's not shown in the picture right here that controls vehicle access. Next slide. Okay, environmental sensitivity. We're told from the charrette that night that you'd be thrilled to see the use of earth-friendly practices. Be disappointed if recycling of resources was not incorporated. And our guiding principles then were lighting makes the ice rink usable at night so the neighbors have to police the park, keep light pollution to a minimum, dark skies ordinance. Recognizing that there might be a time to use pesticides, but utilize natural means to treat weeds following existing city procedures. Use native and adapted plant species with drip irrigation and composting. Incorporate the use of recycled materials and green building materials. Keep the park environmentally friendly. Stop drainage and erosion problems. Next slide. So this kind of gets back to this whole edge, and I kind of already gave you a precursor to that early. But the entire, so here's the rattlesnake drainage, here's the park, here's the new fence line and the interpretive signs and the trail. Everything back drains into the park. There's a natural low area in the ice skating rink zone here that, because it is clay lined, it doesn't have fast infiltration rates, but it still works as a detention basin if you have a really big deluge. Okay, so a big seasonal thunderstorm comes through, water drains back, it evaporates. That can be improved by actually putting in a drainage medium and drain to a low spot in that, and take some of that surface water out into a gravel bed. But it's a back drain going into turf. The turf is a natural cleaning, cleans out the metals and the pesticides and the stuff that's coming off the surface water runoff and those flushes, and works as a biofilter. When we move up, going up toward the tennis courts, we have other adjacent spaces that have been left open to handle drainage in that side. So not letting anything from the park go into the drainage, the rattlesnake drainage. Everything on the edge is, like I say, going to go with native plant materials, maybe drip irrigation during establishment, taking it off drip, then to go xeric after that, and no pesticide or fertilization within that zone. Next slide.
Are the walkways concrete or asphalt?
The walkways currently are for the city's spec, and that's asphalt. But those are back drained as well. So they're not a crown section, they're a inside curve section that goes toward the park side. So this is what that edge looks like. You can see the interpretive sign back here, the native plantings. This is we went to a little different fence configuration to let it seem visually more open, with a black vinyl chain link and wood posts through the zone, so it visually feels more connected. And then the recycling station, and those have been placed strategically through the park for separation of the waste materials coming out of it. The individual plants through here, as a part of this interpretive zone, as I mentioned here, would have little name placards that would tell you what it was. So it could actually be used as both a historical reference to native plants, but also the opportunity as a demonstration garden of how other residences throughout the neighborhood could implement some of these plants right in their own backyard, especially those who maybe front the rattlesnake itself, and these would be plants that would work in that zone and give them ideas. Next slide. Okay, the ice rink. So, the ice rink, a lot of work done in that ice rink. It's a very, very delicate piece of this park. To take much more than a light hand at the design of it, I ultimately thought would be a mistake. But I did find there were some things that we could do to help it. And as I learned through the process, this ice is within about a degree of working. So, outside of changing global warming or climate patterns or any of that stuff, I can't do anything about that. But I can create shade. I can add more shade. And the park exists currently on the south side, has all that existing cover, which is great. There are a couple holes, and we filled those in. So where there was light that would be able to come through a spot in the trees, we're plugging that up to add shade. But on the north and the east and kind of west ends where it turns around the edges, we've added a whole row of conifers in there. So that when you get up on the ice in this, it really feels like a hollow in the woods. I mean, it is surrounded by conifers now in this configuration. And it is as shaded as we can make it. We ran some sun angle analysis and we spotted where shade occurred at different seasonal changes and where the sun spots, but we also knew that from you guys that night. I mean, we know where the rough spots were, where the patches are and where the sun hits it and where those little things. If we could cast a shadow and keep another hour of shade in that zone, we might be able to solve the problem. So we did that. And beyond that is obviously we're kind of accessing around the turf. The trail system, the circulation pattern creates better access. We have maintenance. This is the current warming hut, but then we also have the maintenance facility that's adjacent. So the tools can be kept close right next to the ice, and those distances are right there at hand. When the old shelter comes down, the fire hose that's coming from that end gets replaced with a new shelter that's very similar to, but small, but like the restroom. And within that is a power hose reel. So the job of pulling the hose out there and reeling it back and doing all of that will improve so that those distances and all that work is being taken place with a motor and machine rather than manual labor. So we think that we made some good improvements, but like I say, they're subtle. Next slide. Okay, so special features. Goes back to my original thing about the history and the rattlesnake. And one of the things I couldn't resist walking between the school, watching the kids come down off that in and out of the park, coming down the street into the park, or coming down through the woods to the park, or coming down by the Poor Farm monument down into the park, and just traversing all through that wooded zone. The Boy Scout little learning area, that little amphitheater that was falling apart was there, and it just seemed like in a bygone era that kids were using that little zone, but now they're not. They're just traversing through it. And yet in that traversing, they were causing some of the biggest erosion problems in the park itself. So there was no control in there. So I knew we needed to control erosion. This was an adjacency. Really, most of this is outside the park, and it's not really part of the park plan, but I show it because I think it solves some of the other problems and creates a unique little connection. So we look at opportunities to create iconic things that you can say, like here, up until this point, I said, meet me at the picnic shelter. Okay, everyone knows where that is. Using a local artist, we have envisioned creating a rattlesnake arbor that comes down off that trail from very near where they park their bikes currently. And it is a gravel trail, comes down, switchbacks, and comes into the edge of the park. And the kids enter and exit going to and from the school through the belly of the rattlesnake and actually come in and out of his mouth. So you'll see another slide. So here he is, and we would grow vines on this, and this would be a covered arbor. And they would just run through here and come out. And then in the paving design, you can see here's the tongue, and then there's planters, and then there's 2 benches. So mom and dad could say, okay, Johnny, meet me at the rattlesnake head, okay, after school, and I'll pick you up there, and we'll go play in the park. Next slide. So this is heavy rebar that's been formed in the shape of the rattlesnake. And essentially these are his rib cage. And the kids just access right through, come out into the park.
Now that's outside the park?
It's out. It really, the park is at the toe of the slope right here. So this is really on the school side. And yeah, we need a connection in there. I think it would improve things, but I couldn't help it. So.
Where's the existing fence line in relationship to the rattlesnake?
It's the existing fence line ties into the first rib.
Okay.
So about right here.
Has it
So
been
it's
surveyed?
it's inside the current line of the park, but it's, yeah.
Has it been surveyed recently?
That line of the park?
Yes.
Yeah, the city surveyor went out there. And so I think they have a pretty good idea where it is. Next slide. Okay. So I'll flip it so even after we turn it on, you'll be able to go up and look at it. That's the parking total. So you've looked at all the little snippets. Down the right side is a really detailed legend of all the components that I just talked to you about. Pineview Drive down here, Mountain View at the top. The basketball court used to be the other way, now it's there. The tennis courts went down to 2 courts from 3, but they're new courts, not resurfaced. The basketball court is a new court, not resurfaced. Okay. The heart of the park is the pavilion right here. There's special paving around its outside edge. The age-appropriate play areas are defined here. This is little tots, little guys, a little bit older, tweens up here. The picnic grounds are in here. The restroom facilities here. Bike racks at the 2 entries. At every entry into the park. So see the kind of the edges, these yellowish trees up here. Those are big shade trees that kind of designate the entry. And at each entry, there's a little park sign that has the rules integrated in the sign. So they're not signs all over fences and all that. Just inside of each entry is a pet cleanup station. So as you're coming and going from outside of any of these, there's one of those at each of those. Here's the rattlesnake coming down. And there's the tongue. There's benches for waiting right in there. You can see in the lines very faintly, but here's the backstop, and here's the backstop, and they're backed by 5 vertical columnar trees, probably, you know, like a bohol maple or a Swedish aspen or something to give kind of a backdrop to those. So that lets these two oppose each other, and then the overlay of a soccer field runs through here, and it all fits. Here's the berm. Here's the existing warming hut shade or cover for the ice rink. Here's the new maintenance building. Tennis courts I told you about. Let's see, you probably can't see it up here, but down over here. Here's the entry coming off the bridge. Come in here, and here's the stretching station, and then the 6 interpretive signs. There's the maintenance building here. These are the drainage areas along the edge, continuous with all the back draining coming into the park. Here's an improved trailhead to get onto the green belt through here. Here's the refuse collection. Am I missing anything?
Toilet?
The restroom is essentially located right there.
Can you show that on the big map?
Yeah, restroom is right here.
Is there still fencing around the tennis courts?
There is fencing around the tennis court. 12-foot high, standard regulation fencing for the tennis courts. So the only fencing, so there's fencing around the tennis courts, and then there's the new fence that runs down this edge, and then there's the fence that runs through here and ties into the first rib cage of the snake. That runs right there.
And is there any concern about vandalism and kids saying down on some fields?
On
If there's on fields, if there's no fencing?
Um,
Big fields?
There certainly is there's a possibility that someone could do anything. There's certain stuff going on there with the fence. Actually, some of the most notable vandalism in this park right now has to do with fences. So, and there's 2 kind of trains of thought with fences. You know, they say that fences make the best neighbors. You know, my space, your space, you're okay. But it also says something that, you know, there's a shutout kind of look. And on a public space like a park that's loved by a community like this, to put a fence line seems like a disservice to embracing the park. So we typically do not put fences on parks anymore because of that, especially neighborhood parks. I should tell you though that there is a separation. There's a 42-inch high little wood slat fence that separates the play areas. So there are defined entries that go to the play equipment, and then there's a little border fence that just doesn't let kids just go, you know, all over. There's some control. And usually you'll see adjacent, like underneath this tree, there'll be a bench right near the entry so that mom or dad could sit there, observe the entry, and watch the kids in the park without necessarily having to sit in the middle of all. So the entries are covered, control has been created, and it also contains the fly bar back here.
It seems like before, the way the park is now, the field spaces, there's separation between the baseball and the soccer, and I've been out there when baseball practice is going on in soccer, where now, the way it's set up, it's either or, to me. Having the soccer field in the middle and baseball diamonds at either end, if the baseball was occupied by both, then soccer couldn't show up, and if soccer was there first, then baseball couldn't exist.
Yeah, this field is very close to where that line was. What's really come into the usable grass space at all is this line. So the amount of usable turf is virtually identical to what's there outside of this little piece that drops into it. Now, the actual size of those fields, since I didn't survey the actual dimensions of those fields, I can't tell you whether they were meeting regulation or not. And what I've shown here is Little League configuration as far as field dimensions, but there's not a skinned infield, and there's not a pitching mound being shown. It's really what we heard from the charrette process was make a open turf area that allows practice to occur, but not full-on game, you know, full-on regulation type of game.
Are there goalposts or something?
They're not goal posts, but there's room by design to accommodate them on either end here.
Just to clarify, all the gray then here, that's all asphalt, is that right? There's no gravel paths or?
No. Yeah, but see, I put the gravel in tan, so that's gravel, but that's out of the picture anyway. These are all asphalt. This is concrete along this edge and concrete along the street. So some of these go to city standards, like rather than, and if you remember the site analysis when we looked at those, we had alligator cracking and a lot of problems with the asphalt on those two edges. So if you go back and make the improvement, then you put in concrete. We didn't put in concrete curb and gutter, but we did put a city regulation curb and sidewalk, both on Mountain View on this side and replacing the existing asphalt, and then along Pineview on this side, so that again, there was a safe zone to walk without going between the cars. Yes.
Any idea how many bear-proof garbage containers they need around there?
I can tell you exactly if you want to remember.
Well, I just want to know
They're all-
specifically how many.
I'll tell you.
They need more than one.
Oh yeah, they're all bear-proof. Okay, we're showing, now some of these things are, let me tell you, some of these things are directly meet the SID, and you have a master plan that goes beyond some of the SID. So there are 18 benches shown in here. There are 6 round picnic tables shown. There are 11 trash receptacles. There are 4 recycling units.
How many water fountains?
There's 1 water fountain.
Where's that?
That water fountain was going to be located right in there. Right, here's the restroom. Oh, excuse me, it got moved to right here. Right there. And it's an ADA accessible green fountain. Yes, sir.
First of all, I think it's an absolutely wonderful plan. I thank you for the hard work you went into that went into it. However, the park doesn't close at dark. In the winter, obviously,
Right.
it stays open, and I think that's as it should be. Where are the lights? Well, let me ask a question of Donna, I think, actually. Is there a city standard for closure hour for a city park?
Generally, neighborhood parks close at dusk, unless, of course, there's lighting.
What do you plan for this one?
It depends on what you all want, quite frankly. There's been a lot of discussion, I'm going to open this for Eric, you're all right with that? There's been a lot of discussion from the folks in the neighborhood about lighting, both ways.
What time does Bonner close in January?
The ordinance states at dark,
Really?
but I can tell you it probably isn't enforced till around 10 o'clock at night.
All right, what, the lighting, I can see some of the lighting, the ones with timers, those are the ones that I'm particularly interested in, but where is the lighting for the walking trails?
Okay, there
Is
is
it low, high?
there is not.
There is
We
not.
have not shown it, and we didn't estimate it in. And that was really a read from the charrette process that we had when we tallied the questionnaires and the charrette responses. It went more who were against additional lighting than for lighting. So our lighting focus for the park sounded like the message we were getting was the biggest usage in the winter was extending our usage down here in the zone. And I asked the question, should we take out any lighting, the existing lights, or should we reuse it if we can? Well, don't take it out if it's there, but we don't want it lit in the, really lit up and encourage people to be out there late. Outside of, very purple, a real purposeful use that was down in here maybe. So what we did is we kept the existing lights, and then you'll see it, you can see it here, but you can see it even clearer so you can see it in the green. I put a yellow dot and it's the D. And so when you come down here, you'll be able to see where those lights actually are. And you'll recognize, like, this was the existing light, and then we added 3 down in this zone. And like I said, these were night sky and they're rectangular cutoff lenses. So what that means is there's no horizontal projection of the light once it's focused. So it is down, and if you were sitting across the street in
As I am.
dinner, looking across at this park, you would not get a hot spot, in your eye. You would see the ice being illuminated, but that's it.
I like it better all the time.
Yes.
Could you tell me about the tween area? What's involved in it? What's in it? What do you see happening there?
I brought some of the literature, and I'll show you some actual cut sheets and show you what those pieces of equipment look like. And I think I mentioned to you, the tweens want to be able to go to the park, and we want to encourage them to go to the park and kind of get off Nintendo and go socialize and actually maybe go take a run or do something. But we're finding that when they do come, they're just kind of loitering. They want to socialize. They don't really want to do a heavy activity, play. So these play equipment things have like little spinners, but maybe 3 or 4 of them sitting across, so they can be silly and talking to each other while they're spinning. And then there's things that they can pull and push against each other, to make it swing. And so they're interesting. I say Campania is out of Europe, and they are kind of cutting edge on this whole idea, and they're really cool. And I have the catalogs back here, and I can show you. They really are pretty neat.
And that area is on the north edge,
Yeah,
north boundary, that's up there? Okay.
Yeah, it's this zone here. This is the 3 to 5-year-old. This would be like 6 to 10, 11, and this would be 12 and up. Because the size of the kid, the space changes as well. It's just kind of, well, maybe it's a poor reference, but like you go to the zoo, the elephant habitat's a lot bigger than the cheetah habitat.
And is that area about in the spot where the third tennis court is now?
Yes, the third tennis court. This all got shifted a little bit, but the third tennis court would have been right about there.
Okay.
I have 2 questions. One is, how do you envision flow of bicycles, like coming up Pineview Drive, given there's a sidewalk and all the parking?
Yeah, let me talk about that for a second. So I told you there's a hierarchy of trail widths, and I think you can probably see different widths in here. But there's a bollard control here, there's a bollard control here, there's a bollard control here, and there's a bollard control there. Okay, so what does that mean? Those are our wide trails, and these are meant to provide full width shortcut through the park. Okay, so a bike could perceivably come this zone, but primarily this is for the maintenance, to get center of the park to maintain from a center point, okay? We felt like the bikes were primarily, when we observed them, either coming through this entry down here or through here, or it was the kids coming all down through here and around this corner. So the bike, we think the primary route for the bike is down this route, and they'll come out right in here, or continue and come out in here. And the kids coming from the school, we think will probably come through here and go either way. If you were a commuter, and we noticed that there is folks that use a park space just to cut, just to, I don't want to have to go 3 blocks and go 2 blocks and come back 1 block and do all that. So this is a great opportunity, park spaces to make that happen. So we think that use is going to come from corner to corner, so there's kind of a movement, and that's why that happens and why this one cuts this way.
My second question was the fire pit. We talked about that.
Fire pit. Yeah, so we got a little mixed message on fire pit, but we've kept it in there. The fire pit's right here, number 22.
Can you show the big map?
Yeah, it's right in here. It isn't a defined space. It's outside of the conifer. There is a deciduous canopy tree, so it's out of leaf. It's in a defined zone now, so you can maintain it. But our recommendation is that actually goes to an outdoor fireplace with a spark arrestor on the flue. And that's going to take some work with the city, because technically that's not an allowed use in the park. But we think you can do it safely, and we think that it's not a very expensive deal. It would have a metal canopy on it and a spark arrestor, and you'd be able to circulate on all sides of it and use it as a warming hut right at the end of the ice. So, great.
It's a beautiful plan, and the rattlesnake's cute and all that, but are we gonna be able to do all this for $750,000? That's a lot of paving.
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, in the cost estimate, all the elements of the SID are met. I can tell you though, be easier to tell you what things are not included, and I'll run through those really quick. Parking striping. Concrete paths for, pads for the picnic tables. Selective demolition or removal of the, we have some of the existing concrete asphalt remnants are in here. That hasn't been included. There's not much in there, but
But you can't get the project done without it.
yeah.
Because, I mean, typically, to me, this looks like the entire thing has to be regraded.
It's not all regraded, that's for sure. But the reason I couldn't give you a number on that is that there's not a detailed survey of the limits and extents of all those little chunks in there. So I can't quantify what that is, but there's not a whole lot in those asphalt concrete chunks to remove. So it's not a big number to begin with in the scope of the other grading number that we have accounted for. So it's not kind of a deal killer in any way. The 6-inch concrete curb and in there and up here, we didn't include. That wasn't listed in the SID, and it was, I think it would make an improvement to do it, and it's what we're showing and we're recommending, but we didn't include it in there. And you could do it without it. Let's see, 17, there's about 40 of the trees that we've recommended through the park are not in the SID. Benches, not all the benches. The picnic tables themselves in this zone. This is, and I'll tell you, I'm going to be deductive a little bit, but when you look at the overall scope, the majority of stuff is in. But this zone of the park, we felt was kind of the picnic zone. So it goes in under the SID as turf panels, okay? But if you choose to implement the picnic zone of the park, this is already built into the design, and you'd add back in the concrete pads and the tables in that zone.
But we can't pay for it out of the
No.
existing money?
Yeah.
So you'd have to come up with another money source to put those in?
Right. And again, you know, a master plan is your roadmap to the future. And it usually guides you for 10 to 20 years, okay? You're fortunate that you have the SID and you have the mechanism to do the real guts of this whole thing. And like the SID said, resurface the tennis courts and the basketball court. But then when you kind of rework and you come through the charrette process and you look at these opportunities and everything, you find out that we could salvage and save and still mess with this and resurface it and save a little bit of money. But we took one court out, and that allowed us to have the funds to actually do new courts. You know, so there's a little balancing going on to get the whole thing to work.
Any chance they can balance in a real bathroom? Or is it a done deal with porta potties?
Well, it was something we talked about really early about the expense of a four-season plumbing bathroom. And it looked like there wasn't a lot of super support after that discussion. So what we got was go 3-season. So that would add. And if that's something that we really wanted to do, we could implement that in the construction drawings and change things around to accommodate it. But it's expensive. Substantially expensive.
Has anyone mentioned using Boy Scouts in this park creation at all?
Not directly, but what I heard was that the community really wants to create opportunities for volunteers and volunteerism in the park. So I think there's numerous projects here.
There are Boy Scouts in the community that are looking for Eagle Scout projects, in which they do this before they're 18. Must be finished before their 18th birthday, and they try and organize a bunch of the boys that are with them, and they would maybe, one boy would take on the project of making several benches, and he has the Boy Scouts that are underneath him, acquire the money and acquire the materials and do the actual sitting, but it would be under your supervision and the park supervision. And I know one boy in Troop 1904 that was currently looking for something like that to do. And there might be other Boy Scouts in the community that might be interested in doing maybe tree planting, or, I don't know what other things, you have.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of projects like that in here, and just like working on the Mobash on the skate park, once we started to divide out all the things in order to accomplish that goal, there were opportunities for in-kind donations of real materials. There were opportunities to come and volunteer and help, in the construction and some of those aspects. There were opportunities to fundraise and bring in additional funding in different ways. So once you get behind, the implementation of a master plan, I think there's a lot of avenues to explore where you can offset some of the cost. Yes, sir.
First off, just thanks for your work on this. It's fantastic. Can you describe a little bit in terms of the process going forward between the master plan we have now and the development of construction drawings? Obviously, some decisions will need to be made as far as what elements to back out, be that 30 or 40 trees or whatever, or maybe something else. How do you see that going from this point forward?
Yeah, what would happen from tonight is you're here and we're still listening, right? So it's your park. I'm just the conveyor of the ideas, okay? I'm trying to put it together. So anything that comes out of here tonight and in the following couple of weeks through Donna and Dave and the Parks Department will come back to me in the implementation of the construction drawings. So typically when we have a master plan, we look at the bidding cycle, we look at how bids are coming in, we look at whether we want to try to do bid alternates and see if we might be able to grab some things in a good bidding environment that are beyond the SID. So there's some strategy that will come in on how we actually bid it. But then there also is just phased construction. So we said we're going to implement the SID and then you would see a SID implementation plan that would kind of clean up. I was just telling you some of the deductive things that we wouldn't do, but you would see in the phase 1 construction. And the guts of this park go in the way you see it. There's some real nice, there's some frostings, there's some icing on the cake here that will make it really super great. But that might take some other efforts, The planting zones for these trees are within cutouts and pop-outs. They're not going away. So someone comes in and say, I want to donate, these trees. That's great. The park is constructed. We have irrigation sleeved into that zone. Let's take the trees and have a planting party and get them in. So we just implemented another phase.
Are there new trees implemented into the SID?
Yes.
Are there some in there that are paid for?
There are
Could be paid
some,
for?
and one important row is this one along the ice rink. But yeah, there are stuff in phase 1, but this one certainly was a SID improvement to the ice skating area. Yes, sir.
Does this project fall into the percent for art realm where certain, something has to be set aside for an artist to decorate, or?
I am not sure with this SID whether that's money that the percent would go on.
I have to check. I honestly don't know.
What about the snake?
But Brian, and Brian is doing some other work for the Parks Department, and he's a wonderful local artist that works in heavy rebar and can form and shape things that are fantastic. And he could definitely implement it, and he's right here. And he and I have talked about the idea and how I was going forward with it. So there is a local source to implement it, and I know it turned out great. And he doesn't know how good he is yet. So whatever that means as far as the bottom line.
In the detail of the ice rink, it looked like the edge of the ice went all the way up to the edge of the asphalt. Are you thinking about changing the shape of the pond at all?
No. Yeah, it's maybe a little illusion. I actually was messing with that a little bit. There's going to be some freeboard in there because we haven't really shot a rim elevation. So when I'm eyeballing ice, I'm actually going from an aerial photograph and looking at the discoloration in the turf in that zone to estimate where the ice went to. So that's a little fuzzy math in there because that's the best I have. But there will be a freeboard and the water won't come all the way up to that edge. And I think if you look at that picture, it shows it just slightly down. But we'd like to bring it up as low. And when we regrade around the rim, if we can get that, level up to both sides, maybe we can raise the water level a little bit. I don't know.
I like having a cushion between
Yeah.
me and the edge of the ice.
Yeah.
Asphalt, 'cause
Yeah.
I like to skate.
So I also think really took a lot into account. I agree with the gentleman that talked about the soccer field in the middle of two potential baseball fields. And so I guess I would suggest eliminating the upper right-hand corner one and just having that as open in the soccer field and just having the playing field down there. That'd be a comment of mine. I think that would make more sense. Also, when you were doing the trees on the north side of the rink,
Yes.
to me, I don't see how those can provide any further shade. I mean, I like the idea of adding shade, but the orientation and such, I can see the two on the end of the rink would help a little bit with the morning sun.
Yeah, these down here are the ones that are the biggest shade providers.
Yep.
But our sun angles are, so low that they only come into more of effect as we go later in the season, a little bit as it starts to etch around these two corners. But trying to get, until these get 140 feet high and actually are just building enclosure,
Yeah, so respectfully, maybe we could go take another look at it, but because the sun's coming up, during our ice time is in the kind of the southeast a little bit to the, and so I really don't think, the only reason I'm saying something about it is maybe we could, instead of putting trees there that aren't going to provide shade, in my opinion, maybe we should have that money spent on other trees.
Yeah. The trees that are filled in some of these holes down in here are really the real shade providers up at the beginning. But this actually does create an isolation and separation of that space and really defines it. And I think it also controls light on the edge and just kind of feels like it's a hall. It's contained on itself. But certainly, this money for these could be distributed to other trees. And these could be filled in. You could do every third one and then come back and add over time.
What's the form now to provide feedback to you guys in terms of the next draft going through?
Well, there's these comments that we're taking right now, and I'll write notes, but we could also, we've got some yellow pads, and certainly you could write detailed messages to me, and I could take them back. I published all your comments from the last meeting, and the Parks Department has a whole comprehensive list of everything everybody said to us, highlighted, and then it was put into a matrix and allowed me to see how people were really feeling about things. And then also, it's kind of an open book with the Parks Department for several weeks, I would think.
What we'd like to do is get the master plan posted on the website, and then work with Dave. We'll have some way for you to either email the department back or Dave back directly, specific comments that you want to make, and we can give you some business cards.
Great.
So if you want to say something right away when you get home tonight, you can either call him a voicemail or send us an email.
Yeah, I have a few comments. It looks nice, first of all. It's very exciting. To segue on the tree issue, I think we have a really big need for trees that we can put in right away. So from the SID money, by the little kids' playground area. Because right now there's no shade there, and by July 1, it's a ghost town. It's too hot to play. So I would say that having trees, shade trees there as soon as we can is a priority.
I would say if you had to prioritize trees, putting shade where the uses are would be your first priority.
Right.
And so benches and play areas are the obvious places.
And then one question I have, is there any sand in any of the play areas?
We did do a new sandbox. And it's
A sandbox?
It's a play structure sand.
How big is it?
It's close, it's a little bit bigger than the current one.
And where is it on there, do you know?
Let's see. Box. See where my finger is.
Oh, okay, yeah, I see that,
right
yeah.
there?
One suggestion I would have is to either make it bigger than you're talking about, or not to have a box, but to have like a corner of that area all sand. Because sand is something that kids can play with forever and ever. It really occupies them, and you can have a lot of kids playing together. And you see a lot of kids that don't know each other bringing their little toys over there and playing. And so it's a feature of a park that seems to really allow kids to interact. And it's not dangerous and it's not too high maintenance. And we have a lot of sand in our park now, and I like that. I know that it's not the best thing for landing or surface areas, but I would suggest making a little bigger sandbox.
Sure, and what we've done here is we actually used a companion containment, play containment piece, so that sand is in it and it has a border and it's, it's cool looking. But certainly it would be easy without affecting this fall zone to double that size if you wanted to. Things.
Okay, yeah, because I think even something without a border is more inviting to kids, because it's not like one kid's playing there and has control of the sandbox. It's just kind of out there.
Yeah.
I mean, it seems like a minor point, but it makes a difference.
Just from the maintenance side of it, though, it will end up having, even if it was an in-ground sandbox, it would end up having a subsurface concrete curb to keep the migration of the 5R play zone from going into the sand and the sand going into the 5R. So there has to be some physical barrier in there. And if you tried to go with a filter fabric or something, it just gets lifted and torn and it just breaks down. So typically when we do it that way, it has a permanent border on it. It could be irregular, it could be colored concrete, it could be very unrecognizable until you're right there on it. So it could blend.
Okay.
But it's something.
Okay, and then the other thing, looking at this, and it might just be from looking at this plan, and it doesn't feel this way on the ground, but it does seem like there's more asphalt, I guess, than I pictured. I like the pathways connecting the different areas of the park together. I think that's great, but it seems like there's a lot of asphalt right there in the middle where everybody's hanging out, and I don't know if it's a good idea or if it's possible to do something else there, get rid of some of that, or not, but that would be something to think about. Looking at it now, it feels like much more asphalt than we have now.
Yeah, there's a balance here too with cost-benefit ratios, here too. For a hard surface, easily maintained and resurfaced, and moving with freeze-thaw cycles, asphalt is it. There are other products that essentially take the indigenous soil type and mix a polymer into the fines of that material that lock it up and bind it, and then they roll it. So it becomes a hard surface kind of trail, and it's just with the indigenous ground. And that needs to be resurfaced and re-rolled every 3 or 4 years, and depending on road usage and how severe winters are, it might be an every other year kind of thing on the main section. So there are options there. And then we move into other product types like concrete and pavers and things like that run the cost up to double easily from asphalt. So that's certainly a thing for you to talk, give me feedback on, because that will have an effect on bottom line if you really feel strongly about the amount of asphalt. Or if you say, is there a way to reduce asphalt and come up with other types of paving firms, that will have a relationship to the bottom line.
Or what about if you just didn't have so many pathways? Some of the green areas were just connected to the other green area.
So the way the pathways work is when we create space, we analyze where and who is coming to and from the space, and we look at human behavior and controlling where they go. So you can't make things too curvy because everyone cuts the corners. That's why, like play areas, you actually have little openings in the fence line so you can control where this happens. It also lets you separate 5R for ADA access, so that the play zone has accessibility to it through the 5R, but it's, if you're trying to push a stroller through it, technically it meets, but it's not ideal. And then we have some real things just with maintenance, and then we have the separation of the bikes from the walkers and the strollers. So there's some width things. So I would say certainly you can, but just because you take a trail out doesn't mean they're going to use it in the same place. And I think if you go back to my original site analysis and you look at some of the wear patterns in the park, there are definite spots you can see where that's happening. And you would improve your maintenance over time by not having to reseed or have those compaction problems and things by actually putting a piece of paving there. So
Yeah, I
it's
see.
something to just have to
those,
balance.
those points all make sense, but maybe it's the kind of park where
Yeah.
people would rather have some, high travel ground instead of another patch of asphalt.
Sure.
I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
something to think about. And my final comment has to do with the basketball court area.
Yeah.
And the ice rink is sort of the late night teenage hangout in winter, and the basketball court is the late night teenage hangout in the summer. And there's a fair amount of trash and things like that in the street right there, and I'm wondering what the absence of the fence there will do to that, whether that will encourage more people kind of in and out of their trucks, hanging on the tailgate of their trucks, playing their music, because it's real easy to back right up there. I don't know, I don't study these things, you do, but I have a little bit of a concern there that might be too open, given how that is used. But I don't know if, having a fence there or something, or some landscaping there would make a difference or not. I don't know.
My feeling is it probably won't in this configuration, and I think probably the openness probably allows for neighborhood surveillance, better, and the fact that everybody can see into the spot, so
Yeah.
no one's really behind the hedgerow in here.
Well, maybe some benches and some
Yeah.
trash cans would be good there then?
There's benches in here,
Okay.
and there's a bike rack here, there's a recycling center here, there's benches underneath here. So there are benches in that zone.
Okay, then I lied, I do have one more comment.
Okay.
About the backstops.
Yeah.
In the soccer, it does seem like we have had trouble with sharing that field, so I don't know that this is the best setup. But if we do take one backstop out, I would just point out that having the backstop up there where it is now, there's more shady areas for people to watch Little League and that kind of thing. And so it might take some of the congestion out of the front entrance of the park down there if you have the viewing area on the other side of the park. Okay, that's all.
Great, thank you. I think in the back.
Again, I think this plan is a great asset and a much needed boost to what the park needed, but like part of your job is you get to stand up there and let us pick you apart. So
Oh, yeah.
I agree with Lynn on a couple of different points. One, Mountain View, the grade of Mountain View is quite a bit higher than the park, and I think without some kind of separation with either, if you take, right now there's a fence, if you take away the fence and you said that the sidewalk wasn't part of the SID, there is no real separation from vehicles. And I know part of the history of vandalism in this park is people driving through there, and so that would be one of my concerns. If the sidewalk wasn't part of the SID, that there should be some kind of barrier. And I think maybe Lynn was trying to say putting benches on the Mountain View side to help, and garbage cans to help people from driving down there, even some privacy fences to help block some noises, just some slatted fence type stuff, and then that would help block the view also. And then again, since I have young kids and I'm kind of reckless myself, I look at the asphalt plan as just this phenomenal rollerblade, huge tag game on bikes. Other than that, I think it's great. Also, when you think of rounding out those corners, because you don't want let people cut the corners, you also allow people like myself on bikes to carry more speed around those corners. So I know it's something that you have to deal with every day in your life. Also, another water fountain closer to where Tom Green comes up. There's an unbelievable amount of bike traffic from the whole greater Missoula that goes up through Tom Green, catches the corner of the park, and then hits Mountain View. And I think having a drinking fountain by the restroom is a phenomenal idea because it dual purpose there and it serves the whole park. But I think having one on that edge would be a huge asset too, and hopefully not a very big expense. Exactly, yeah, like there, even at that entrance, we get that, the trail across the creek, we get,
So we have that stretching station right here. So,
That would be a good
Perfect,
spot.
yeah.
You can blast in the park now, huh?
On the backstop that we are talking about on the northeast side,
Right.
are there berms behind that also?
There isn't.
Okay.
Yeah, the only berm is this piece here.
Okay.
Because there was room and this goes up a hill, so a wayward ball would be going uphill here, and here it has the potential of going out in the street.
And those, the trees that are kind of incorporated into defining the space, are those part of the SID?
These?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, if you take away the fence at the bottom of the, where all the cars are parked at the bottom, what's to prevent me from taking my vehicle and running out into the lawn in my vehicle and chewing up the lawn?
Well, number one, there's a curb.
Of what?
Number two, there's a berm. Number three, there's trees in here now. And number four, right in here on where you have the paved surface, there's a curb cut, but there's a removable bollard, access bollard. So the usable width of that trail is actually reduced unless a maintenance vehicle or emergency vehicle needs to drop the bollard to come in.
So you think the curb is going to prevent someone from running around down there and
Well,
chewing up the grass?
it's going to prevent your little Toyota Corolla, but it's not going to prevent, many of the big pickup trucks from going into the.
Don't-
Pickup trucks do a real good job of
Yeah.
off-road use,
Yes.
outdoor land.
Donna, do we see problems at Bonner Park with cars going onto the field? Because that's set up just like that, isn't it?
We honestly, we don't see a difference in damage with vehicles to parks because they're fenced or not fenced. I can't explain why. We just don't.
I can make a little input there because we've lived across the street from that, those parked cars for 6 years, and 3 times in the winter, every time, then on either edge of the winter, and just as the grass was most vulnerable during the spring and fall, there have been people that have pushed down the fence with their vehicle and gone out. So a lot of the damage to the fence out there, other than when it was middle school and the kids were climbing all the time, when it's been laid over, it's been people just pushed over the fence and drove out there. So I don't know how many people were prevented from thinking about doing that, but that was another thing. And then the schoolyard also gets hit about once a year, and they just find a way to drive around to the point where they can get. You're gonna find plenty of holes.
Just digging that sewer line, I bet you would like to line that whole southern edge.
That might be a good use for those boulders, I think, 5 feet or 4 feet.
Do you know if you were able to save the tall swing?
Yes, the tall swing has been saved and it was replaced right here.
In the tween area?
Yeah, it's right here.
Are you talking about,
Because the distance on that swing is so big,
It is.
the
No.
fall zone is huge,
I
and that's
think
that
they're-
zone,
are you talking about the metal swing or the wooden swing?
The wood.
the wooden swing.
Okay. I think that what people liked about that was that it was an infant swing.
Yeah, it just doesn't fit in the zone.
Oh, so it's still an infant swing.
It is a swing, so
Whatever we choose to bucket put on there.
it's a huge infant swing. You got some big babies here.
Are those the only swings then, that one there?
No, there's another swing. There's a couple of other swing type stuff in each of the zones. So, yeah.
Got a question for Donna. In your letter, it said you're going to discuss use of the park by local schools. Do they use it now, or are they going to keep using it? Will Clark Fork School use it? They're adding on 4 new classrooms.
Clark Fork School does tend to use the park quite a bit. We don't have any particular plan or detailed discussion on how much. Pineview does not use the park that much unless it's for a special outing or program.
Rattlesnake.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
We actually hope, it goes back to the context on that. We actually hope that teachers might, go out here to this interpretive edge, and this was that perimeter circulation too, that this kind of, the school embraces this kind of opportunity for outdoor learning.
Did you have something in mind in the design that you would hope would either encourage?
No, I
or
just, my
discourage
son used to
resident?
go down from Rattlesnake and do science at the creek. I hope they just keep doing it.
Oh,
It's just such a nice park down there.
Yes, right here.
Well, there's a big sign and it's all staked out just south of the Pease Farm for soccer and Little League. And I'm assuming that's, I don't know when that will be done, but that's going to take an awful lot of heat off of,
2 years ago, college.
I would think, the use of Pineview for both baseball and soccer. At least competitive. I mean, there'll still be practice, I hope. But I'm wondering whether we could get away without backstops, or at least only one backstop, maybe the existing one. Because I think a lot of the more formal, even semi-formal ball playing is going to go over to the Pease, over to the other side of the creek. I hope it will. But I don't know when that will be done, so I don't know when this will be done either.
I mean, when we talked about it the last time, it really, sounded like those opportunities were existing in other places. And yet, this neighborhood needs to be served by, the local kids and coach that says, let's go out and practice some drills out here. But we're gonna play our game on Saturday somewhere else.
Yeah, I think that will happen. Yeah, it'd be great.
one of the things he talked about too, though, is the fact that the existing ball field faces south, which is tough on the players.
Yeah, that's true.
But it's
And
only
so-
tough on the batter.
Oh,
Well, then
okay.
we
If you switch it the other way, then the batter's the only one, not the coach. But you're right.
But without the berms on that southwest side, that would provide more soccer practice area without the berms.
And there was still the little kids could come down in here and practice drills and stuff down in this zone. So there's some more usable room down there for that. But there's not regulation width by any means.
We don't
I think
need it.
there's hardly anybody that expects anything regulation out there.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
I think what I is just pick up practices, maybe a pickup game.
and that's why
That's about
I'm
it.
showing you is real little league dimensions in here. So, you could have 4 teams that want to stake out 4 corners in here doing their thing, or you could have 2, soccer practices going on, or you could divide it up a lot of different ways. I purely wanted to show you that the ability to practice to a real dimension is available in that space. And that may not even be existing today. Maybe the one field, but not everything.
The pavilion, how big is it in, say, in comparison to this room?
I think that pavilion, well, let me just double check here.
For the existing one.
I think it was about,
I don't know, that's what
Same size as the old space? or-
it's about the same size. It's a different type of building, obviously, but the area within it is about the same size.
What I didn't like about the old one was, except on really hot days, if we had a Boy Scout meeting out there, or if we had a community meeting, as soon as the sun went down, the cold air came off the creek, and I always liked that wall on the west side. It seemed like it provided a little bit of shelter from the cold that always swept across that old shelter. And I wish that thing had 2 walls on it facing the creek.
Yeah.
It just seemed, the walls don't have to go all the way down to the ground.
So this really, now it's, it's kind of tucked behind the fence lines in here, and then all the new trees in this zone. It's most exposed from this kind of southeasterly.
I wish there was a fire pit, right next to it or something, so you could sort of stand around it, be sheltered, and still you could sort of get warm. And so maybe
What
what
happened to the old
one?
one? Do you remember what happened to the old one? The old fire pit that's in the shelter that's there now?
I didn't know there ever was one.
Yeah.
Look on the cement or the asphalt, because it's covered in cement. There was one that almost burnt that thing
Who
down.
did that?
Well,
I'm not saying,
there should never have been a
but
fire
the mayor was involved. That's all I can say.
I just thought maybe a fire pit, outside it a few feet, so you sort of felt, like you'd be protected by the rain or snow or something flew over there and they had a little fire there.
Anybody have anything else?
I think now we have a light over on the sidewalk of Mountain View over there.
Yeah.
Is there still gonna be a
See,
tall
there's-
light over there?
There's the existing one that's down behind the.
Yeah, there's one on the sidewalk.
There's one that's up here on the street.
Is that one gonna stay there?
It stays there.
Yeah, where are the cookies?
That's a good question.
If you remove the one baseball thing, would you still keep the berm? The berm, to me, seems to be quite a nice feature.
I think we probably would, for some of the other reasons. It creates some passive deterrence. It also gives an informal way to sit on the edge, and it controls kids from running into the street and balls going off and those sort of things.
As long as we're taking notes, and one thing maybe for one of your Eagle Scouts is Tom Green's supposed to be left in its natural state to be used as an interpretive deal, and if we're gonna do a bunch of signing on this, it'd be nice if somebody would pick up the ball and carry that and raise some money and take it into Tom Green also. Be another project, or, you know, if there was a group that wanted to get involved or had some extra money or so on and so forth.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, that is a good point.
Well, I think
Right, that would be.
it's a great thing to take to them, because it's the watershed, and it shows about a neighborhood embracing Tom Green and the importance of the watershed and how you start to do that in a neighborhood. And so there is a lot of crossover, and it seems like that's something that could be a joint kind of project.
Okay, what we're going to do is, Dave, you'll have to help me out with the timeline. Dave's our tech guy too, so. We'll get this information posted to the website. We'll establish a time frame for comments. And probably about 2 weeks after we post it. And then based on your comments will be any last adjustments. And then it will be time for Fred to take us into the next level of design, further refine the design, refine the costs, and move forward. I'm hoping and guessing with some sort of spring construction schedule. And of course, throughout that, we'll keep you posted at both the website and through the Pineview Park Board. They continue to maintain their website as well. And
Friends of Pineview Park.
Friends of Pineview Park, thanks. Anything else that we're leaving out? We've got all your comments down tonight.
So when construction starts, what is the time frame for completion for a project like this?
I would say implementing the SID, the general contractor coming in, it's probably 2 month to 3 month construction project.
Our biggest challenge would be our patience waiting for things to grow in the park.
Go to Evans Tree Service and get some of those super trees. Actually, seriously, I could show you some in my front yard that have, they're 50, 60 feet high after, when was the June snowstorm? Was that 96?
No, that was 2001. That was 2001.
Well, all right,
That was the earlier snowstorm.
these are 6-year-old trees, and you'd be welcome to anytime, just to,
It was June 4th,
they're amazing.
2001.
It's amazing. I think we have a life expectancy of about 10 years, but.
All right, I don't want to ask, but I'm going to ask. Have we established any dog use plans?
Cleanup station at every entry.
That's it.
But the idea of the dog park was discussed, and it didn't, I mean, having a designated dog area or anything like that, and that didn't grow any wings or tails. So
It'll be
outside of,
consistent with other city parks?
probably, I would think that's Donna's probably interpretation.
If we take no action to do something different, it would be consistent with other city parks, which would be dogs on a leash. If action is taken and requested to do something differently, then that's what we would take through the process.
Have you had many complaints about this park and the dogs in the past?
You know, only when there's several large dogs not being watched, which, since I live up there, I can describe more specifically when. Probably when everybody's up there playing hockey and there's a whole lot of big dogs. And it's kind of on a nice day and you get young families coming through at the same time, then we hear it. And we also hear about not cleaning up,
because the hockey players can't see when their dogs are eliminating because they're playing hockey. So I would say that pretty much those are the two complaints the Parks Department gets. The biggest one is cleanup. The second is when there's a dozen dogs and somebody's walking through with, you know, Fifi or Teeny or something, and, you know, 6 retrievers come after them. Otherwise, no.
This is very friendly. Sometimes
Good?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Don.
Thanks for enduring the heat.
Yeah. Here? Oh my gosh. Yeah, the building shuts down.
Oh,
The computer must have said, oh, it's done. Oh, this is nothing. I know, it's totally compared to my house, yeah.